How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. We're going to look at the median net worth of households in the US, and we're going to see how much Bitcoin they can actually have depending on their age. Now, of course, this is the median net worth, so just to be clear, this is not the average. Average takes into effect the outliers, people that make a ton of money, that have net worths in the tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then the people that are very poor as well. This is the median. So, check off one at the top, check off one at the bottom, check one off top, check one off at the bottom, and we get to that middle. We're going to be looking at that and then showing, depending on how aggressive you want to buy Bitcoin, how much could you actually buy if you had the median net worth. Now, before we start, if you like this kind of thing, let me know. It's a little bit different. Also, if you want to trade cryptocurrency, there is a link to Margex underneath the video where you can long Bitcoin, you can short Bitcoin, you can trade other cryptocurrency assets as well. I think this is the time to be doing this, getting ready for the next leg up, because I think overall things do look pretty bullish, even though we are seeing a bit of red over the last couple days. I want to be positioned in this market to the long side. So if you want to sign up, there's that link underneath the video. Now, let's start here. Spreadsheet video. I love these. I was just watching actually a George Camel, who works with Dave Ramsey, video, and he was going through the median net worth by age of different groups of Americans. And apologize if I say average net worth, I mean median. Now, for people under 35, you're just getting a job, you're maybe getting out of college, you're starting to work. The median net worth is $39,000. So not a huge amount, right? But you're starting to save a little bit. You paid off some student loans. The median net worth, $39,000. Now, you're starting to maybe have kids at this time too. It's hard to start gaining wealth over time. It's hard to really put a lot towards retirement. And it's also hard to buy Bitcoin at this point. Of course, you have less liabilities, less responsibility. So if you're single or if you're making good money, maybe you can put a little bit more towards Bitcoin. And I wanted to look at, depending on if you're 1% Bitcoin or 5% or 15% or 50 or 95% Bitcoin, how much can you actually buy if you're just the median person, right? So a 1% allocation towards Bitcoin would buy you less than 1/100th of a Bitcoin, 0.007 Bitcoin at this point. Now, if you got a little bit more aggressive, you're young, you can buy more. You could buy 0.033 Bitcoin if you went 5% allocation towards Bitcoin. Again, you'd probably have to do this over time, right? Because if you're funneling everything into the 401k and the Bitcoin's price goes up, it would be hard to time it. But let's say you get more aggressive. You go 15% Bitcoin. You could almost get 0.1 Bitcoin just if you're the median person, right? So 15% Bitcoin, almost $6,000 in Bitcoin. I'm assuming a $60,000 Bitcoin. Of course, we can update this when Bitcoin's price goes up or down. If you get more aggressive, you put half of your net worth. I'm not saying to do this. I'm not saying this by any means, right? I'm not saying to go put half of your net worth in Bitcoin. Of course, some people do that. Some people put more. But you could get a third of a Bitcoin, which is more than the average millionaire will ever be able to buy, because there are too many millionaires and there's not enough Bitcoin. So you could actually get more than the average millionaire. You could buy 0.325 Bitcoin. And that's by, 35, under 35, you could get this. And of course, then you could stack other assets. If you went really aggressive, I know there's some people that do this, that just go like everything but their checking account is in Bitcoin. You could get 0.618 Bitcoin. At this point too, actually, I'm going to leave these columns here. This is going to be fun when we go through those. We'll go through those a little bit later in the video, but let's say we want to get a little bit deeper. Let me actually zoom in a little bit so you can see. We're going to go to the next age bracket, which is 35 to 44. At this point, you've worked your job a little bit longer. Maybe you've got promotion. You're moving up in the work world. Right? Your kids are maybe getting a little bit older. They can take care of themselves. Maybe your significant other goes back to work after staying at home. Your net worth starts ballooning, right? You've had more time in the market, $135,000. This is actually going to be the biggest percentage jump, which makes sense. You're working so much longer at this point. The biggest percentage jump from the last net worth category. So you have $135,000. Again, if we start investing maybe just a conservative 1% into Bitcoin, you're not really going to notice if it goes down to zero. You would have 0.023 Bitcoin At $1 million Bitcoin, you're sitting at about $20,000 of net worth in Bitcoin, $23,000. Maybe you want to get more aggressive. You start buying more. You can buy 0.113 if you want to go 5% allocation. Let's just unlock all these here. 15% Bitcoin, you would have 0.338 Bitcoin. Again, that kind of magical number where you're over a third of a Bitcoin. You're over what the average millionaire can ever buy. If you go 50% Bitcoin, you could actually get over one full Bitcoin. You could be a whole coiner, right? You could have then $60,000, $70,000 in other assets as well. Maybe you have a down payment for a house. Maybe you have some 401k. In this scenario, though, if you did have your own house and you had $135,000 net worth and you were a whole coiner, like, you don't have much outside of Bitcoin because a down payment on a house is quite expensive these days. So you would be probably pushing almost all your money into Bitcoin outside of that house payment, down payment, and then your 401k as well, living expenses, etc. If you went 95% Bitcoin, obviously you're just funneling almost everything you can make into Bitcoin. You'd have multi-whole coiner status. Okay, cool. I like it. Of course, again, not saying you should put 95% of your net worth into Bitcoin. The volatility there is quite high. So your net worth could go from 135,000 up to 250,000, 300,000, then back down to 50,000. Like, there's a lot of volatility there. But let's get into the next bracket. This is where maybe your kids are starting to become high schoolers, start going into college. So you might have a little bit more free time to work. You're probably at near the peak of your career, right? Either 45 to 64. Those are the two scenarios where you're probably at the peak of your game. You still have a lot of energy. And then you're probably able to save more for retirement. $247,000. I'll be honest with you, at this point, like, this is okay, I guess. But you probably will have a tough time getting close to retiring on $250,000 in your mid-50s, right? You probably need, depending on where you're at, obviously you need different amounts, but the median net worth is not enough to retire comfortably in the US, in my opinion. But if you start putting some in Bitcoin, maybe you can get a little bit better return. So 1% allocation to Bitcoin, 0.04 Bitcoin. So it's significantly more than when you're a little bit younger, but still not a ton of Bitcoin right there. Especially for a $250,000 net worth. 5% Bitcoin, you could get 0.2 Bitcoin, which is getting closer to, a decent chunk. If Bitcoin goes to $1 million, you could almost double your net worth in that scenario. 15% Bitcoin, you could get 0.618 Bitcoin. 50% Bitcoin, you could be multi-coiner. 95% Bitcoin, you could have 3.911 Bitcoin. Now, again, stay through because we have some interesting numbers here. So at this point, you could be ultra aggressive. I don't think it makes as much sense when you're getting into these older categories to go really heavy on Bitcoin. Of course, typically it returns better, but the volatility is quite high. You have to wait longer, which maybe you want to retire. Maybe you have a health thing come up and you don't want to wait 3 more years to sell your Bitcoin, right? Or your significant other pressures you to sell it or something like that. So I would not be this aggressive later in life unless you just have like really good cash flowing assets that are just spitting out tons of capital. I think it makes sense to be a little bit less risky as you get closer to retirement, of course. And then 55 to 64, this is the highest net worth the median has, I believe. Let me just check. No, I'm wrong on that. There's one more. But 55 to 64, you're probably eyeing retirement, maybe retiring. Kids are out of school. Maybe they're moving back in or they just moved out again out of college. 365,000. Of course, let's just go through these real quick. If you put 1% to Bitcoin, 0.061. 5% to Bitcoin, 0.3. Cool. 15% to Bitcoin, almost a whole coiner. 50% to Bitcoin, 3 coiner. And then 95% to Bitcoin, very aggressive there, 5.78 Bitcoin. Okay. So obviously at this point, you're probably decreasing risk. As I said before, you're probably still looking for some return. So you might be more like in this 1 to 5% category, maybe 15% Bitcoin, especially if you bought during the bear market, maybe you're 3-4% turned into 15%. But at this point, yeah, you're still not going to become a whole coiner unless you get more aggressive. And then 65 to 74, same thing, $410,000 net worth. You can become a whole coiner at about 15% Bitcoin allocation. You can have 3.4 Bitcoin at 50% allocation. 95% allocation to Bitcoin would get you about 6.5 Bitcoin. Again, that's as of now. That can change very quickly. And then 75 plus. Most likely you're in retirement. You're probably, spending time with kids or grandkids or doing stuff that you love. Your net worth starts to draw down. You are getting older, so you don't need quite as much. I don't think this is really enough to retire, unless you're going to some very low cost of living area, or you're getting a lot in a pension, or some kind of cash flow that's outside of what I can see here. Of course, if you have a paid off house, maybe you can skimp by, but it's going to be hard with $400,000. The 4% rule there would show that you can get about $16,000 a year from your investments. But maybe Bitcoin saves you. Maybe Bitcoin goes to the moon. And if you had 5% allocation, you'd have over a quarter coin. If you had 15% allocation, you'd have about 0.84 Bitcoin. 50% allocation would be 2.79 Bitcoin. And then 95% allocation, you could have 5.3 Bitcoin. Again, maybe Bitcoin does really well in your lifetime, but and then you have a higher net worth, but I would not be banking on it if you're 75 plus. I would not just, invest 95% or 50% into Bitcoin. It's definitely this game where you want to, especially if your net worth is lower, maybe you want to find some high paying job, but that's hard when you're this old. And then also maybe you want to invest in a little bit riskier assets, but again, you don't have much time to make it up. If you screw up with $100,000, you're just gone. You don't have that 100,000. So it's a very risky game. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting. If we look at people's overall net worth, so if you went 100% Bitcoin, I'm not saying to do that, but just like translate the net worth into Bitcoin. Okay. The median net worth of someone 35 or younger is 0.65 Bitcoin. Again, just converting their net worth into Bitcoin. 35 to 44, the net worth is 2.25 Bitcoin. Median net worth for someone 45 to 54, 4.11 Bitcoin. 55 to 64, 6.08. 65 to 74, 6.83. 75 plus, 5.58 Bitcoin. Okay, so if you converted everything, you'd be multi-coiner in these scenarios, right? From 45 to, 75 plus. Actually, 35 to 75 plus. That'd be 100% Bitcoin. You never sell. That's interesting. You can work your whole life and just get a few Bitcoin, 5, 6 Bitcoin. Now, what was this a couple of years ago? I know oftentimes there are those graphics that you might see on Twitter showing the house value over time in Bitcoin. What about your entire net worth in Bitcoin? So for the median household, they're worth 0.65 Bitcoin. 4 years ago, this amount, this $39,000, would have actually bought you 3.71 Bitcoin. And the median net worth of someone 35 to 44, instead of 2.25 Bitcoin, it would have bought you 12.86. 45 to 54, you could have bought 23.52 Bitcoin. Let's keep on going down the line, all the way down to 65 to 74 when your net worth peaks out. You would have been worth 39.05 Bitcoin. And I'm not picking specific dates that make it look good. Now, I just went 4 years back, October of 2020. So if we had cherry picked the bottom of the bear market where Bitcoin was 3,500 instead of 10,500, that bear market, you could have had over 100 Bitcoin, not even being 100% allocated to Bitcoin, but at 3,500, you could have been like 90% allocated and had triple figure Bitcoin, which would be worth $6 million today. Again, I'm not saying to do that, but as you can see, your net worth goes down in Bitcoin over time because Bitcoin just appreciates more than just about everything. Let's get really down and dirty and look at 2016. Obviously, the past results are not indicative of future returns, but your net worth, just $39,000, would have been 63.52 Bitcoin. Now it's worth 0.65. Okay. We've gone up about 100x since then. So your purchasing power in Bitcoin down 100x. You could have bought a new car, or you could have bought 63 Bitcoin, right? That's just crazy. And then average net worth of someone 35 to 44, median net worth 135,000. Now it's worth about 2.25 Bitcoin. Back then, about 220 Bitcoin. Let's go down. $410,000 in this range, 65 to 74. Now gets you 6.83 Bitcoin. Used to be 667 Bitcoin. Again, we're not cherry picking. We're not cherry picking the bottom of 2016 either. This is just 8 years ago today. This is with Bitcoin not even at all-time highs, right? 20% off all-time highs. Yeah, could have bought you 667 Bitcoin. What's that worth now? Let's do this. Let's do it. 60,000 times 667, worth about $40 million. Okay, so you could have not even been close to a millionaire status if you had bought 100% Bitcoin, which is crazy. I know that's crazy, especially back in 2016. That's extremely risky. You have had to go through multiple cycles, multiple exchange blowups, all that. You'd be worth $40 million. So while I'm not saying to go 100% Bitcoin, 95, 50, even 15, like you have to make your own decision. The fact is, Bitcoin has appreciated at 50% a year, give or take. So as the cycles go on, you might not feel like buying Bitcoin at certain prices. You might feel like you want to wait for a bigger dip. But if you just buy and hold for a cycle, typically you do quite well. And yeah, the average person, the median person, can't buy that much Bitcoin. Right? Especially if you're not getting super aggressive, going 95% of your net worth, which the median person can't do that. They can't, first of all, they don't know how to even buy Bitcoin. The median person does not own any Bitcoin at this point. Like it's probably 5% of people, 10% of people in the US. I know some stats say 30% or something like that. I think there are less people that own cryptocurrency than that. But the median person can't buy this much Bitcoin because they have money tied up in houses and businesses and 401ks. Of course, now you can buy through the IBIT ETF and through other ETFs. But the average person can't buy this much Bitcoin. There's too much tied up. They can't handle the volatility. They don't know enough about it. Maybe they buy 1 or 2% Bitcoin. I know some people that just buy a couple $100. They're worth millions and they buy a couple $100 as a plaything, right? But that's it. So it's tough. It's tough out there. You're going to have to invest a lot or make more over time, obviously, to be in this whole coiner club, multi-coiner, etc. But if you have, a decent amount of Bitcoin, if you have a Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin, and you're 35 or younger, 45 and younger, you're probably doing pretty well compared to the normal person. Let me know your thoughts on this underneath the video. Again, let me know if you like videos like this, a little bit different, a little bit less news-based, a little bit more fun. Also, if you want to trade crypto, if you want to try to stack your Bitcoin a bit faster, there's the link to Margex underneath the video where you can leverage your Bitcoin. Just make sure you understand what you're doing. You can leverage other assets as well, other cryptos. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.